I'm Katarina Wetter Edman. I'm currently a doctoral student in design and looking foremost at service design and what happens when designers start to work with service instead of products. We're trained normally, I am a trained designer and I worked as design manager for some years before I started to do research. And we designers are trained to work with physical material and stuff and how they should look and feel. But what happens when we move that knowledge into a context which more immaterial subjects, processes and time, and how can designers use their professional knowledge, artistic knowledge in these processes? When you have that in material objects, that easily comes out as shape, form, etc. But we don't really know what happens when we work in that context of service.
You've set the bar too high.
Yes. This is mean. No, I was just saying that, hello, I'm Arne van Oosterom. I founded an agency called DesignThinkers Group, and I founded a network called the Design Thinking Network. Period.
That's not fair.
I was going to leave the rest for the discussion.
No. I'm Steve Vargo. I'm a professor of marketing at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. About the last 15 years, but particularly the last 8 years, I've been working kind of a grand theory level, thinking about economic exchange and value creation and how that process works, which some people find kind of odd because they think we've already done that in economics and in marketing, and we've been talking about it for 100 years at least. And, what I keep finding is that we talk about it, but we haven't ever really studied it, and so it keeps leading us to intractable questions and dead ends in terms of thinking creatively about things. So I've been trying to pull some of those pieces apart and re-examine some of them and end up with something that's now called Service Dominat Logic.
Going back then, I came to this position within the organization straight from my industrial design education, and I'd been out working at several places during and before as well. But as a designer coming into an organizational level and to talk about what is important when you organize and set up, in this case, strategies for product development or how that should be perceived, finding myself in very stupid arguments about color, for example, when that was not if this product should be green or red, but it's more about how do we understand and put together an interesting context for, in this case, children, it was toys, so how could we get them to have an interesting play environment and how to go there from our internal context. And I found it very difficult to set that in that organization. I kept running into walls all the time, and even if we had several disciplines in there, I didn't figure out how that was.
How did you notice that those walls were there?
It hurt my head. I ran into them. No,
but I mean, did it just like stop the project, or never started the project, or?
Yes, both. Or it was, I didn't feel that we got where I wanted with the projects, that they kind of ended. It was difficult to get them through, to integrate actually the idea that we really wanted to go, to reach out with them. And I just, and personally, of course, this is also about several things at the same time, but personally, I felt that I needed to know more about different things. Which I think there it started my interest to kind of find out more about designers' roles research-wise, and also be able to feed back into education, etc., how to be better prepared and understand. For me, this was a lot about not having an argument that was valid enough. When you discuss, somebody said, well, red always sells the best. We know that. Then we're going to have empty shelves. Yeah, but the kids cannot only have red toys, right? It's not going to be fun. We don't have to understand it in another way. We have to have an argument that goes beyond just the economical argument, if you write in that kind of situation. And how could I then make myself clear? And I guess that's, you always have some kind of pursuit. I guess when you go into research as well, that's been part of my drivers. But then it's moving into more of a service-oriented idea
Yeah.
is coming later on.
I always felt that, at least maybe you have the same feeling, that I kind of moved into areas where I wasn't really allowed to be in. You know, so because of at least my background being very difficult with lots of different stuff I did, from design to strategy, from change management, from all kinds of stuff, that I had got a taste from of all kinds of different things. But my last job was as a designer. I was not allowed to be part of you know, the strategy of my clients, or you know, I wasn't allowed to fiddle around with their business, or you know, they wouldn't allow me in. They just they sent me the brief, and that was it. But I always got the brief, and I thought, oh, but the product isn't good. I want to do something with the product, but wasn't allowed to do so. And I always wanted to do research too, because you know, get some customer insight. Wasn't allowed to do that too, because I had other agencies, and there was another department doing that kind of research. And now all of a sudden, and it's, you know, because of, you know, call it design thinking, service design, or call it whatever it is, it's sort of easier to kind of say, well, no, it's a whole holistic thing. So I you know, you can't just, you know, do one thing. It's not just marketing. You know, it's also, when it's service, you know, you also have to be ready to provide that service. So it's also your organization, it's also your culture, and it's also, you know, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now all of a sudden I find myself in places where I'm not allowed in, and it used to be, you know, that used to be a bad thing. And I find that some clients actually allow me in that space all of a sudden. There's this room because they have questions. I don't know if that's, you know, you experience the same thing. Or maybe it's just because, you know, I don't know, something changed, I think. What do you think?
Yes, I think previously, it's right, that you're not wanted to be where you were not allowed, because why should you be at our marketing meeting? You're just a designer. You're occupied with products. You shouldn't be there. Or why should you be there? Or why do you want to read this? You're supposed to do this little box. But when you now say that, if we see this as a holistic thing or a value creation process where everybody is involved, that just becomes a lot. You have to have a perspective that comes outside in, right? So you have to really understand that. And to do that, you can argue for both more research, more broader understanding of the context, and both external and internal context. And all of a sudden you have an argument to actually be part of all this, to be able to deliver or say something that is important and relevant in that situation.
I keep trying to figure out where I fit in all this. I mean, in one sense, I don't fit because I'm not from design. I am from marketing, both academic and real life marketing. And so I fit in one sense that everything I've ever done that's turned out successful by almost any measure has been doing something that I was told couldn't be done or shouldn't be done, or it's the wrong way to do whatever you're going about. And it's always, so I've always kind of looked at the world a little bit differently. But I came into marketing from doing entrepreneurial activity.
Okay.
And so I just naturally gravitated to, well, I did marketing well, so what's called marketing, so I focused on marketing, and I was doing hospitality, so I belonged in service marketing, and it was at that point that nothing made any sense after that. Did it make any sense that we had a services marketing and a goods marketing? Do we really have two worlds out there that are doing that you approach in different ways? Did it make any sense that we are just now having service? We're just having a service economy after manufacturing? Didn't everything we did before we had manufacturing amount to service? Or I wanted clothes to the tailor, we would call it service today. So it's just a bunch of intractable questions. And so how do we make sense of that? And as I started making sense of that, I kept finding some patterns. One is that the models are all upside down. That we don't have service as a special case of goods. We have service as an explanation of why we have economic activity, and goods as a means of providing service. And once you sort of turn that back upside the other way, that it's not goods dominant and it's service dominant, the intractable questions fall away and everything starts making sense. But it raises a whole lot of other issues, like how do we think about doing things creatively? Invention doesn't work anymore because we're not talking about inventing things. We're talking about solving problems in novel ways. And so that's how I end up in design, is a backdoor looking for a different metaphor, a different approach, a different concept of creativity that you don't find in the product world.
Yeah, I think it fits in because, at least the way I connected to Service Dominat Logic, in a way, for me, was when I read one of the papers you wrote. For me, there was the penny drop, basically, because the difference between, because I was kind of getting familiar with service design jargon, basically. And the design thinking, idea, and then Service Dominat Logic kind of said, first of all, because there's no difference between goods and, or at least a good is also what you call what's it?
Service delivery
mechanism. And then I thought, oh yeah, because I was trying to explain to people, like, this is not. It's not just a product, but it actually creates value. You have to, but because as a designer, I would always explain that if a designer designs that, you have to understand the context of the whole thing. You have to understand, what factory is going to be made and how it's going to, what hand it's going to hold. Also, the whole usage of it and the image of it, etc. The whole thing. And so understanding the context and understanding the bigger story of it. Which is, again, for me, it's actually the one thing that design adds to all this.
Is context?
Yes, it's the ability to take a step back. Design allows you to take the step back and look at the whole, the bigger story, and look at the context, which allows you, again, to look at, value, for instance, and how value is being created within a certain context. And it's a mindset. So it's not so much. So if I talk about design, service design or design thinking, for instance, I don't mean someone who's really good in design, like in graphic design or product design. These people, they're trained to do this, and we need to have them too. Again, this is where this feeling of being in areas you don't, you're not allowed to be in. Don't be in that design space, because this is where the designers are in. But it's a mindset. It's actually the ability to say, okay, wait, this, you had a solution. That's that product you had. It's fine. Let's throw that away and now look at the context. Where is this taking place? And how is this happening, and what value is being created, and so you become a creative solution finder. So, you try to solve things, and not so much create more products or what have you, and I think that is where Service Dominat Logic as well, because it's a logic. This is why it clicked really well with, I think, when you talk about design thinking as a mindset too. It's like, yes, it's a mindset. We're not going to do anything really different in that sense, but we're going to think about it really different, and then we will, it will produce other things probably, but it's
right.
But it's more like but it's another approach to it. We don't use other people. We're not going to have completely new people in our business, but we need that other way of looking at it.
And that's where the overlap is. We too talk about mindsets, and we talk about lenses, and we talk about zooming out, taking a wider view, that it's really it's not about the glass. The glass is incidental, and it's a solution, but it's a temporary solution. We'll find other ways in other contexts of solving drinking, of doing drinking and solving that problem. So we actually define markets in terms of institutionalized solutions, kind of agreed upon ways of solving problems for a particular point in time for a while. I get nervous, however, when I hear people talk about service design, and you've heard I've brought it up a couple times in the past, that because service often means to a lot of people a special kind of good, and a good that's characterized by things like intangibility and heterogeneity and perishability, etc. Or an add-on to a good. So what a lot of people mean when they talk about service design is designing better services. They're back to design, trying to turn service into a product and then design it better, and we're back to all of the problems that we had that Service Dominat Logic is trying to get away from. And it's not about value creation, it's about making things pretty and putting them on the loading dock.
Right.
And we're finished.
Yeah.
That's back to the problem you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I think people are struggling with it too. I think that I think there's a the movement and it uses service design because it allows people to talk about a certain topic. It makes it easier. The words makes it easier. But I think that it's also it's a quickly changing area as well. I think for instance, I really disagree when people call themselves service designer. I don't understand what that is.
Well, and I think we're saying sort of the same thing there,
Yeah, I guess, I read your stuff, so I know.
But I haven't written a lot about design. I've written a
Heavily
little about
influenced
design.
by you. No, but seriously, that's why that penny drop, because I thought, because it makes no sense. What do you do when you're a service designer?
Right.
It's a multidisciplinary approach. You need, it can't be holistic and have designers. What's that then? What are you, a project manager? You oversee the whole thing, or what have you? So that makes no sense. But it's for me it signifies a search of a particular group of, especially a lot of young designers who came in and wanted to do also like social design and stuff like that. Who wanted to be and use their skills in another way and create value in another way. Not just design things and products. So usually a lot of these people came from product design, for instance, and went to do service design with this wish of doing more. And I think many of them I know, and they are evolving actually into saying, but because one thing they all noticed the last couple of years, you design a service, it's really nice, so you come up with beautiful touch points basically and a great plan, and it doesn't get implemented. Why not? Because you didn't understand the business structure, you didn't understand the business process, you didn't understand the culture, you didn't understand it. So it was just like an add-on, sort of like you try to stick it on, and then the people you work for say, it's lovely, it's a wonderful presentation, we're inspired, it's fantastic, but nothing really happens. So I see now that actually, and that is, I'm one of those people that we were searching for this other thing, this logic, saying how can we actually implement these things? And this is where we started thinking, at least I started thinking, it doesn't start with focusing on end users or customers. No, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. It's actually going from inside the company, saying, why are you here? What is your vision? What are your values? And what do you really, what do you want? And what can you do? And then if you understand that, then you know what actually you can offer to either stakeholders or customers. But if you don't understand that, it becomes really difficult. So that again, we came into this area where we are not allowed, because this is where consultants are and change managers and all those people who know a lot about organizational redesign and et cetera, et cetera. So what we find in what we did in our agency, at least, is we started working together with all these people who know their stuff inside organizations. So designers are part of the team. So it's not just the designer doing it. It's actually I wouldn't let a designer change my organization. I wouldn't let a designer change my organization. But this multidisciplinary approach, something we've been talking about for years already, as well. But I don't know, somehow. So what is your feeling about that?
But yes, we have had this discussion also too, and because I struggle also with that, and since I've been writing a little bit on the subject too, it's like, you need to name things in a way, and sometimes you do it for different reasons. But I try to. It's both a perspective, and I'm struggling if it is a discipline or not, because you see certain tools and methods that are evolving more specifically in order to kind of capture this idea of processes from this perspective, mappings, customer journeys, kind of a language came more like a lingo that is developing around the idea of developing service. If you call it then service design, design for service, of service, we have a flora of different expressions. If you want to, how close you want to be, or how deep you are into, I think, is service logic in this or not. But if you understand this, service as value creation and value creation processes, and design as processes as well for value creation, to develop prerequisites for value creation, because that's what design would be here, to help develop what these propositions of value could be, a tool for that, methods for that in the coursework. It's in a perspective that brings in that, but then it also demands a certain set of tools. You cannot go back totally with your functional analysis that I was taught as an industrial designer to understand this. So then other methods and tools are developed for understand these in this perspective that also allows many others to come. If those tools should be called service design tools or not, I don't know. But we have tools that capture other things.
I think if we have a common...
So I kind of have this Möbius kind of idea that you have a perspective that moves, makes you do things that you shouldn't have done otherwise, and then goes.
I think if we have a common understanding what we mean by service, it's just it's a term with a lot of baggage. I mean, I use it, and I use it still, because there isn't another term that captures what it needs to say.
No.
It precisely is service we're talking about. But it's a dangerous term, because it means almost two opposing kinds of things to different people. So I get more comfortable with terms like design thinking. That seems to be more of a mindset rather than a task. It's more it's more a lens than it is a normative theory of how you should go about something. Lucy Kimball's was designing for service.
Yes.
Bill Moodridge, if that's pronounced right, but what was his designing for interaction?
Yes.
Those kinds of notions. So we might even think about designing for value creation, or designing for value might be a reasonable term for capturing.
Well, we've been talking about that too. About I don't like service design because because I have to explain to everyone. No, it's not the opposite of product design. No, exactly. that's not the point.
Exactly.
And in design thinking, it's the same. But because people say thinking, it's just thinking. I thought it was about doing. Yes, no. Design thinking is all about doing. No, I just started explaining words again. So there's so many words, and you also have a large group of people who are into business modeling, and there's things like Scrum, and there's Agile, and there's Lean Startup, and there's there's a lot of these words going on, and these names that actually, if you talk to all these people, they are doing the same thing. They're thinking about the same. They have the same issues, the same problems, and they're trying to solve them in a similar way. That's really fascinating. So that's why I really like as well tomorrow as well the meeting, thinking about how can we bridge these things, because now the other day I was at a conference on design thinking at the D School in Potsdam in Berlin. It was all about design thinking, and I really like design thinking because I understand design thinking as being a mindset, and with that mindset you first start understanding the bigger picture and understanding the question. First see what the real question is, and if you know the question, then you see whatever tools or methods or whatever you want to give an answer to this question. But being a mindset, but at the same time they were establishing another community there, and I was so amazed, because I said, and there were no service design people there, which is again was like, where are all these service design people? That's that other community. And so somebody planted a flag saying, no, this is design thinking, and this is my area, and then somebody else planted the service design flag, and I really want somehow to find a way to kind of bridge that, because I think all we are saying is you need to collaborate. We need this multidisciplinary approach, and it's all about having this open mindset, and that is for me design thinking, having the ability to learn from people with a different other background, and being open to people who talk different lingo, another language, being able to collaborate in these teams together, and not being stuck in your little silo and doing your own little thing, because that's how we were brought up, and that's how we work in most companies.
But what would be specifically the design part of design thinking for you? If you say the thinking part is the doing part, what is design thinking?
The design thing, well, no, I think that, again, it's this word. I didn't invent the word design thinking. I don't know.
Now you use it, so what do you fill it with?
For me, for me, what it really means is actually, is again, the same thing, being able to take the step back and saying, well, I don't know, but let's find out. And no, I don't have a ready-made answer, or I have a package for this, or it's a I don't know if there's this Prince 2 software, you're familiar with it, but people who are in IT are familiar with this term, that you kind of tick all the boxes. Basically, that's what you have to do. Tick all the boxes, in this software, and then you're done. And then something will come out, and you don't really understand what happens. You have no clue, as long as you tick the boxes. So when we use this is a tool. So if we use tools, for instance, the tool itself is part of the creative process. It's part of first understanding the question, and then find the tool, whatever fit, and then change the tool if because it's not about the tools. It's not about the method. It's about what do you really want. What is it you want to have, and why are you doing what you do? Ask any company. Go to a telco and ask them. So why are you on this planet? What is it? What is your vision? And how is your vision translated into incentives and the way you're organizing your culture, and what you deliver, the value that you create? How is that? Just tell me. They don't know. First of all, they'll look up their vision on their website. Whatever. And they, and it's not. It's not in line. It's not aligned. And I think design has first of all. The ability that allows you to take a step back, and it gives you the freedom to kind of to question everything, to say, well, why? I don't get this. No, to me personally, it allowed that, and I think that design is really good at it, because you can't design anything if you can't question things, if you cannot look at the bigger picture, if you can't take things apart, you cannot design, and you cannot design if you're not allowed to experiment or make mistakes. It's impossible. You can't ask a designer to design a glass. You get one go, and if it's wrong, you're fired. It's impossible. You get that glass exactly that one, probably, maybe a different color. If it's risky. But you can't, because you have to try and so it's not so much what you do, it's a mindset.
Design would encourage you to find to explore even other solutions than a glass to.
Probably, because
solving
you will
the same
question
problem.
the glass.
Yeah,
you will say,
right.
So why would you need the glass exactly? What was the point? And it will and it gives energy. It gives so there's this period of what we call in design, you call it the fuzzy front end, basically. In business and in school, most schools, you are. You don't like that. That's a moment which makes you insecure. You don't know what the outcome will be. Go to any meeting in a business, and you'll probably know at the beginning of the meeting what the outcome will be. For designers, that makes no sense. Why go into that meeting if you know what's going to happen anyway? So that fuzzy front end gives you energy and gives you the ability to kind of this is where everything switches on, because you need to find a solution. But you're allowed to be there, and it's okay to be in that space. And so I think design gives it adds that to the whole process.
Because I'm both I'm a bit reluctant sometimes on the way we use design thinking and what that implies, because we had this huge discussion, kind of same time as Estelle has also developed, kind of, or from the more prominently, or in the late 90s, early zeros, or whatever you would say.
Early zeros.
Nobody's found a good term for that yet.
That's probably a design
millennium,
problem. Where I was away a couple of years, and then I came back, and before I'd never heard design thinking, and when I came back, it was all over the place. It was Harvard Business Review, it was Kelly's design books, it was IDEO, and how design is this perfect tool for innovation. and it becomes a very normative tool. If you apply design, everything is going to be fine. It's going to be happy. We come from the outside in. We have the user's perspective, and everybody can do it. And maybe I'm just very like easily offended. It's like, I have 5 years training, and you should do a D-School camp for 5 hours, and you come out as a perfect designer.
But there are two things. First of all, like I said, so there's this space that you occupy, and people move in that you don't want them to be in there.
So they move down into my space here.
Yeah. So like I get into arguments with people who feel that I'm into their these are ethnographers, ethnographic research. So they say, what you do is no research, I was trained for that. But it's exactly, if you have that overlap, it allows you to collaborate. I think that's my take on it. It doesn't mean they're going to take over, but it allows a better understanding. It allows me to understand what they do, but it allows me to see their value too. And it's also really good to know what you don't know. So I mean, if you're arrogant, you think you can do everything. You get people calling themselves service designers. Then all of a sudden you think, can you do everything? That's amazing. But if the mindset is open and curious and interested in, so then you will venture into other people's worlds basically, and I think it's design thinking again that will probably allow you to venture into their world and to say, oh, but that's interesting. So what do you do? But
it's interesting. I like the sort of fuzzy front end notion, because it's one of those things that I think sometimes we get upside down. Another one of those things we get upside down. That fuzzy front ends are what happen on occasion, so we have to learn to deal with them. Fuzzy front ends is the way the world works. Yes. Occasionally we get things that are sort of non-fuzzy front ends. That is, we know that there's a glass market because we've decided on that for a while. So it sort of functions like what we teach in school, but there's no a priori glass market sitting out there. It's just an agreed upon solution. So what we're dealing with is fuzzy front ends, and we need to kind of turn that the other way, so we get a big picture, a proper picture of real business, rather than, as I said a while ago, what we teach in schools, which is about big businesses and things that function sort of like markets, etc. The other topic that I think probably needs talked about is it's real easy to fall into, from a discussion of talking about design, to fall into the notion of co-creation of value means inviting people into the design process.
But they're two fundamentally totally different parts of.
I know, but it's pretty easy on its own for people just to talk about value co-creation as meaning involving potential customers in firm activities, and for me that's not what it means at all. That value creation is something that happens in what we've called the customer's space. And the firm is a player, usually a fairly bit player, in the value co-creation that the customer is the primary integrator for. We might invite them in to, and maybe one of the ways we can help them best is invite them in some cases to be part of the design process, but they're not equivalent. So we got all these books out on value co-creation. And they're really just about doing research, asking the customer what they want in their product, bring them into the design, help involving them in the creation of the value proposition, but not figuring out how the company can become can provide platforms that make value co-creation easier on the customers. On the customer side, so we tend to tease those apart. We call the one co-production, and which is nested in, but not at all the same as co-creation of value, and so at some point it needs to sort of reconcile where does design and co-creation come together if it's not in inviting the customer to be a designer.
I think that it's interesting, because I would say, first, from my perspective, when we think about value, the co-creation of value, we kind of look at it from a multi-stakeholder way. So we don't. So it's not just the customer. There's so many other stakeholders there. So it's the end user basically is one of the stakeholders of the whole process. So
there is no end user in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense there is no end user. So and they all participate in the creation of this value and understanding and analyzing how that happens. Again, I think that for me this is where my the design mindset comes in. Again, looking at the bigger picture and looking at how value is being created and value not just being money but all kinds of other stuff, and the value being created in the sense of that any stakeholder. The value is being created when the stakeholder is helped by this system to reach a certain goal. That value is being created, because the value is not created because you use a certain product. That's usually not your goal. Your goal is something else. Beyond that.
The system is improved in some way, or as defined by the system itself. Yeah.
Yes. So it's so where design comes in the end is actually I think that so take a consumer, for instance, and a company that provides this value. I think first of all, design comes in by really starting to understand its customers' needs, understanding. So research is of course really important, but I think more and more this is like an ongoing thing, especially if you think about services. As being dominant and looking at whatever you produce as a service in helping a customer reach a certain goal. So you have to first of all understand what these goals are and what value is. So if you don't understand what a customer values, you don't really know what you're going to, how you're going to help this customer. So what we tend to do is it comes in research, but in qualitative research. So qualitative research in the sense that you really start analyzing what customers do, what they're trying to achieve, and how you can actually help them, and how the system you build or you're part of can actually help them achieve that goal. So it's in research, one thing, and then translating those insights into a solution, into a possible solutions for them, and then ongoing having iterations on that all the time. So again, building a system that will allow you to get feedback and to change your proposition and
It's also in the realization that you can only provide partial solutions.
Yes.
Nothing a firm provides to a customer is a total solution.
No, but that's why you have to kind of really understand what the customer is going to. So, for instance, we did a session on healthcare the other day, and usually you start with a company or somebody has a solution already. So we have this app. So they had an app, and here's an app, and now we want to do some research if people really like this or how to use it. What we will tend to do is say, well, okay, let's throw away the app first, and let's first see when one of those potential customers, who is that person, and what is that person trying to achieve, and how is that? What else is this person doing? What's the bigger story? Right, and then all of a sudden you understand the context of where this solution is taking place. And it will allow you to find, in this particular case, we found a lot of other opportunities for this particular app that they never thought of. Like, we could actually do that for this, because you're thinking about the value that you create, not so much selling that product or saying, where can we sell, which shop can we put this, So I think, again, design, allows you again to step back and then look at the bigger picture, and then design solutions for it. So then putting it back together again.
And it's exactly what you're talking about here is the step from looking at the context, understanding what that would be, like value and use value context idea, and then synthesize that into insights, as you said. It's not to say they want this, they said they wanted this, and we do that, but to make that insights together with the cultural knowledge that you have around.
This is the value
that you have in that wider context, and then from that go onwards to a solution, which is a fundamentally different way of working. If you say what would be a design way of working here, is to do those iterations,
taking things apart and putting them back together, and that is typical for a design approach. If you take things apart and then you say, this is interesting, I know all the parts, and let's put it together this way.
But isn't it also in the realization that the customer is a designer? the customer's going to take apart whatever solution you give. They're going to take it apart and put it together with some other things in unique ways. And so can you design so that people can use it in their own designs?
But can you not?
Well, but
I mean,
don't you need
anyway.
to? Yes, and so don't you need to realize that that's what that I can design better by understanding that I'm just designing input into somebody else's design process.
Well, that's why the relationship between. I mean, I think a simple example is what you see in smartphones these days. I mean, people. Exactly. If you use a smartphone, I mean, the company that built the smartphone and provides the software really wants to know, wants you to use it. They don't want you to put it away. And 10 years ago, when we had what's that, dumb phones or normal phones. I mean, if you bought the phone, you would put it in the closet, and that's it, and nobody cares, right? I mean, and Nokia would never know that you did it anyway. So I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting change, that now the relationship between this end user, or the user of the services, and the company changes, because Apple or now Nokia with their smartphones or what have you, they want you to use it because it needs to be alive, and it's fascinating because this is the conversation they're having with you. And they see that, they like this and they don't like that, and they use this, and so you are designing your own phone, your own tablet.
The smartphone isn't smart because it's smart. The smartphone is smart because it allows the user to use it in smart ways, to use it smartly, and so so everybody can sort of design their own instrument with the modular smartphone and apps and etc.
And you see this everywhere now, and even companies like Volkswagen, for instance, they now say that in the future, I mean not now straight away, but in the future they will provide mobility services. And if you think about it, they lease a lot of cars. I mean, that's a big portion of their income, actually. So it's this is where we're again looking at what do people really need, give them the tools to do it, and then look how to use it, because it's and I think if Apple was, for instance, was really smart, they would like their products back as well, the hardware too, because why not? I don't need to have it. Give it. Lease it to me. I'll pay you a monthly fee, but in 2 years' time, when you really want me to buy the new one because it's so much better and smarter than the old one, you just sold me. But I can actually return it, and you can get all the value material that's in it. Because again, I think this is where service design thinking, or whatever, kind of moves into this circular economy thinking, which is interesting too, because that kind of connects as well. To saying, I don't need to have it. I don't need to have the ownership of it. I just
need the service flows that
why do I have to buy a new one? You want it back because there's all kinds of valuable material in it. You probably want to use produce other stuff. So I think that probably that I wouldn't be surprised if we see that.
Well, you do see it in a lot of industries, and you see it with power by the hour, and increasingly selling service flows, selling climate instead of air conditioners, and
sales
the things that people really want, and it does an interesting thing because it sort of aligns the customer and the company better. I mean, as you said a while ago, Apple doesn't want it to work very long, or they can't sell a second one. So, but if you sell the service flows and it belongs to Apple, then Apple wants it to work. For a really long time, because they don't have to replace it and build a new one, and they still get the income over time.